Hello everyone and welcome back to Prestige Reef. In the last 15 years I've kept all sorts of amazing coral, but once again, having said that, not all of my purchases were a good idea. In this video I'm going to show you the top 5 corals which I regretted buying and why they were a bad choice. Purchasing coral is very subjective, therefore this video will be even more controversial than my last one, and some of these will definitely surprise you. A couple more things I'd like to mention is my opinion of these corals were formed before I owned a coral farm, and I just had one reef tank where I was trying to care for a whole range of different corals in a comparatively small space. It was also when I had less experience in the hobby, therefore I was more prone to beginner mistakes. Now that I have a farm, it's a lot easier to care for individual corals' needs as I've got a lot more tanks. Number 5. Scolymia. Now I know this is going to be the second most controversial coral on this list, narrowly being slightly less controversial than my number 2 slot. People love Scolymia, but personally for me, they just don't do it, which I know is blasphemy in the reefing community, but our corals in our tanks are very much a personal choice. Interestingly, for me, trackies do it, and they're sort of like an odd shape Scolymia if you think about it. There are 3 issues I have with them. Firstly, in the wild, they are kept in slightly cooler waters, therefore they do better in slightly colder tanks, and it's important to not let your water go over 25 degrees Celsius for long-term success. A temperature spike is what I believed killed my original one many years ago. Secondly, although not essential in every single system, in the majority of tanks they do far better when they're target fed every few days. This makes them more high maintenance than other corals, as not only do you have to actively make sure they're getting enough nutrients, you also need to fight away any fish or shrimp trying to snatch the food out of their mouth. My final issue is their high cost. They are of course a very pretty coral, but in my opinion there are also so many other very pretty corals that could be purchased with that money instead. Number 4. Sun coral. These have a very similar feeding issue to Scolymia, but is actually much worse. Scolymia can get some of their energy from photosynthesis, whereas sun corals don't photosynthesize at all. This means all of their nutrients need to be provided by the hobbyist, and their health can quickly decline if you become lazy. On top of this, some reefers find, including me, that most of the time during the day they are completely closed, and relatively unattractive. You only get to see their real beauty at night when it's dark, so you can't fully appreciate them. Number 3. Galaxea. I love Galaxea, so it might appear like an odd choice for this list, but my Galaxea killed a 350 pound Trachophilia, therefore it has without a doubt earned its place in the 3rd slot. This is of course my fault, as they have deceptively long sweeper tentacles and a very powerful sting. These tentacles can be up to 10 inches long, which is a high amount of uninhabitable space required for them. In our tanks with limited space, this can be too much to sacrifice for a single coral. There is however a way to manage the sweeper tentacles with flow, and providing you place them in an area where their tentacles are being blown away from other corals, they are less of an issue. Number 2. Acropora. As I said, this is going to be a very controversial choice, but for all the people that disagree with it, ask yourself if you're the average hobbyist, or if you've had years experience in the hobby and have also lots of expensive equipment to help you. There is no doubt in my mind, of all the issues I've had with corals over the years, this group of corals has caused me more trouble than all the others combined. There are obviously exceptions to the rule, however these corals require more stability than most, and can easily start to strip overnight the moment you take your eye off the ball. Even their pests can be more difficult to eradicate. The other thing about them is they have a habit of randomly turning brown, which can take months to recover from. Now don't get me wrong, other corals do change colour in different environments, but very few change this drastically. If you're thinking about getting into the high-end Acropora side of the hobby, just be prepared to spend a huge amount of money on something which looks amazing, and then after you buy it, 3 days later looks dull. The only reason this group of corals wasn't number 1 on this list is that I'm not aware of any tank shutdowns specifically because of Acropora. That's not the same for the next coral on my list. Number 1. Xenia. When it comes to tank destroying corals, Xenia is king. It's well known for being extremely fast growing, which can be a good thing at first. The biggest problem, however, is that it can't be contained. Similar corals like green star polyps, zoas and pallies can be contained on an isolated rock, where it's difficult for them to spread, can easily be trimmed back and won't cause you any trouble. This is not the case for Xenia at all. Xenia will do whatever it pleases. In the infamous words of Dr. Malcolm from Jurassic Park, life will find a way. Even fragging it can make the situation worse, because tissue left behind can regenerate, as well as any bit you accidentally break off, which is now at the mercy of your flow. I have attempted numerous times to contain this fascinating coral, with various different methods, and as far as I know, it can't be done. This is the reason it has secured the #1 slot of corals I regret. Before I go, there is one more thing I'd like to mention. For the people in the UK that support the channel on Patreon, you are now able to select corals directly from the wholesaler. I will post pictures before I visit, and will then collect what you ask me to and ship it to you. This allows you access to a huge amount of corals which you wouldn't normally see, as they might not have been something which I would have picked previously. Button Scolemias are a great example of this, and so far this has worked very well with my existing patrons. That's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed watching my video. Please feel free to comment below if you have any questions. As always, I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. Have a good week, and I'll see you next time.